The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.
Hey guys, welcome to Alternative Experience. So, your food has been designed to be as addictive as cigarettes. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory, but your programming is specifically designed for you to assume that it is. Why would they do that? So, what proof do I have? Just the official story, which is actually really easy to find, even on Google, on Wikipedia, which we know have been kind of hijacked these days. But let me save you the time, and I'm going to summarize it for you, and then you can go off and do your own due diligence to make sure I'm not some kind of nutcase. So back in 1985, Big Tobacco set in motion basically a plan that was going to make the developed West fatter and sicker than ever before. Whether that was their intention, I don't know. I think it was just to really sign up lifelong subscribers. But around about this time, what had happened is attitudes towards smoking were shifting massively. The number of smokers was dropping drastically, and governments had begun to enact bans on things like advertising, and they were also rolling out a lot of education programs to the general public about the harms of smoking. Naturally, this created an enormous panic within the tobacco industry, but Big Tobacco had a trick up their sleeves. What they did is they began to buy up and take over the food industry. So in the US alone, Philip Morris, who owned Marlboro cigarettes, they bought General Foods in 1985 for about $5.6 billion. In that same year, R.J. Reynolds, they acquired Nabisco for $4.9 billion. Then in 1988, Philip Morris followed up and bought Kraft for $12.9 billion. So I'm sure there's a few companies that you recognize the names of there, but Kraft are absolutely enormous when it comes to the food and retail industry, I suppose. Suddenly the makers of Marlboro cigarettes controlled the food sources and products that Americans and Westerners had eaten for decades. So the tobacco industry didn't master creating tobacco products. In fact, they actually butchered them. What they did is they added over 75 extra chemicals specifically to engineer that addiction we've talked about. And once the world began to turn their back on cigarettes, they simply transferred those teams of chemists along with all of that expertise. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to identify something they coined as the bliss point, the perfect ratio of fat, precise salt levels, and calculated sugar amounts. But isn't that what we want from our food? Perfect ratios. Well, if those perfect ratios were for health, then you would be correct. But that's not what they were trying to achieve. Instead, this formula was designed specifically to bypass human willpower and to trigger dopamine receptors in the same way as nicotine and heroin. By the early 1990s, they could not hook kids on cigarettes anymore. So instead, they turned their attentions to food. Think about it. Adverts developed these lovable cartoon mascots. Fast food restaurants around the world started to include toys inside their packages. And if you ever watched Saturday morning cartoons, adverts were bombarding kids until they began begging for their own future downfall. But why would they do that? What was the goal? I know everybody uses this question as kind of an excuse to stop thinking about it. But they wanted to create lifetime customers before they were able to make informed choices. So, get them addicted at a very young age. These have then become their sort of normal habits. In the same way that our parents couldn't leave the house without their ciggies, a new generation would not be able to walk past McDonald's without getting their quick fix. Throughout the 1990s, their food scientists were designing products that dissolved quickly so you don't ever feel full. They activate multiple pleasure receptors simultaneously in the brain, and these are the same receptors, as I say, that are activated by heroin and nicotine. They created dopamine spikes that leave you craving more, and they also created imbalances in the microbiome via the introduction of bad bacteria, which just so happen to be extremely dominant when it comes to controlling our food-seeking behaviours. So your cravings for processed food aren't due to a lack of willpower. They were specifically designed by the same people that had engineered cigarette addiction, and they're very, very good at what they do. Unlike cigarettes, which faced regulation in the 1990s, these companies could openly market processed food as, fun, convenient, healthy alternatives. We saw that one a lot. Part of a balanced diet. There were so many little phrases that they coined to promote these foods. And they did this all while making it increasingly addictive year upon year. Not only were no warning labels required at this time, even governing bodies were in on the scam. They were adding products such as Lucky Charms to the food pyramid above nutrient-dense whole foods such as red meat. And that's something that's still true today. So the result of this diabolical 40-year experiment, let's again take America by example, because they are the country which are the main drivers of this phenomenon. So in the US now, they have diabetes rates which have tripled. I think they may have actually quadrupled, but definitely tripled since 1980. 74% of adults are overweight or obese versus around 45% back in 1980. And heart disease is still the number one killer despite so many medical advances. The tobacco playbook worked perfectly, just with a very different product. Okay, so these things are very, very well engineered. So breaking these habits is extremely hard. Okay, but if you are ready to break free from processed food, high fructose corn syrups, that kind of stuff, then there is a 4-step process that can help you on your way. And if you stick to it, it's guaranteed to get you to where you want to be. The first part is eat real, single ingredient, local whole foods, preferably without packaging from like a farmer's market. But if they're whole foods and they're local, that's good enough. Focus on things like eggs, fruits, meats, and healthy fats, and any other single ingredient foods that you can get your hands on. Number 2, read the goddamn label. Now, I know one of the biggest problems is none of us ever read the small print, whether that's agreeing to your iPhone app sort of contracts, whatever it might be. We don't read the small print, and that's what they rely upon. You need to start reading the ingredients in the foods that you choose to use to fuel your body. It's the absolute minimum requirement of personal responsibility. You want to make sure that you're avoiding any foods containing hydrogenated oils, seed oils, you've probably heard about that a lot recently, high fructose corn syrup, and if there are more than 3 to 5 ingredients that you can't pronounce, steer well clear of it. The shorter the ingredient list, the better. Whole foods have 1. 3, cook at home. You control the ingredients when you cook at home, and no matter how busy you are, you can spend 30 minutes on a Sunday cooking 2 kilos of protein that's going to last you for the entire week. Ready meals and ultra-processed foods are literally filled to the brim with binders, emulsifiers, preservatives, additives, colorings, flavorings. Real food does not have this. Simple. Number 4, fast. Whether you practice regular intermittent fasting, which I recommend you do every day, either by pushing your breakfast a bit later or preferably having your dinner a bit earlier, one thing that I highly recommend is that you fast. You can even do longer fasts on a quarterly, yearly basis. It doesn't matter how you do it, but basically it's one of the best ways for you to beat cravings from those bad bacteria in your system. So when you fast regularly for, let's say, regularly on an intermittent basis, or let's say 48 hours plus, we completely reset our microbiome, meaning we wipe out the majority of the bacteria present, other than good bacteria which survive on mucus and actually thrive in the absence of food. They do exist, and because we're always eating, they never get a chance to thrive. So long as you break your fast using healthy single ingredient foods, you're going to very quickly bring balance back to your microbiome, and it's going to end those powerful food-seeking signals that are associated with the junk foods, the processed foods, and it's also going to cut those cravings that are, I suppose, they're engineered to promote in the first place. Stick with that 4-step plan. Do it for 3 or 4 weeks, and you'll be surprised. You will no longer be craving those negative, unhealthy foods. It really is that powerful. So I hope you enjoyed that. There is obviously so much more I can go into on this subject, but I think that gives you a nice understanding on why it is that we want to be steering clear of any fake foods. Not only are they highly detrimental to our health, they are not nutritious. They do not contain the minerals that we need unless they've been added, and even that there is conjecture with regards to how effective that is. But we really do need to be sort of taking control and going back to eating how our ancestors did. Whether that be ancestors 100 years ago that shopped locally in farmers markets and could only eat seasonal whole foods, or whether that be our ancestors back in our hunter-gatherer days, which fed themselves from the land. We need to be sort of taking a bit of a leaf out of their book and eating the way that they would have. But if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. Please like, share, and if you can, give us a rating. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. It really does help us. Follow me for more content like this. Cheers, guys. The Alternative Experience.
The Alternative Experience.
The alternative experience.